I am Hope Alwyn. I will be presenting this webinar. I'm a digital accessibility specialist here at Accessible Web. So let's just quickly go over our agenda. We are going to cover just getting started with web authoring tools and a couple of definitions that need to be set up front. Then we're going to get a little familiar with Shopify itself and then dive deep into the customization traps, which we're going to cover the basics and then do a slight deep dive into some more complex components, followed by the accessible product pages and wrap it up with sustainable monitor. First things first, let's go ahead and define web authoring software. Shopify is a web authoring software tool. So a web authoring software is a web application or app that allows users to create, design, and manage websites. Most web authoring software focuses on users without a lot of technical knowledge of HTML, CSS, or JavaScript, and helps them create content by adding the code for them. Some big examples are Shopify, WordPress, Weebly, Squarespace, and there's many more out there. Those were just a couple that I've either used or had experience with over time. Usually they cover all the important things like hosting a website for a small price, as well as creating pre-built components for the ability to sell products or share things like blogs. Be aware that accessibility is usually placed on the back burner, as once a user starts creating and customizing their content, they may add elements that are not necessarily accessible. While most authoring software can guarantee accessibility for its right out of the box state, once customizations are introduced, it falls to the customer to make their site accessible, not the web authoring software. So before you get started making your website, let's look at some ways to evaluate your web authoring software first to make sure it has the appropriate tools for accessibility, such as, is there an accessibility support page? This kind of lets you know that the software acknowledges accessibility as well as what tools may already be built into the software itself. Another question is, what tools are available to ensure you can add needed elements for accessibility? Or how is the website actually built? For example, does it have the ability to add alt text easily once an image is uploaded? Another question is how the website is built. Does it utilize a WYSIWYG editor or a drag and drop interface? And with that, let's go ahead and define WYSIWYG, which is what you see is what you get. It looks like a small text editor, but has powerful tools to make writing web content easier, as the user only has to worry about the appearance within the editor, while the WYSIWYG generates the appropriate code for each element, like adding the correct heading tags for a heading. It takes the coding portion out of the equation for the user. While beneficial, no WYSIWYG is perfect, and sometimes what is done within it may not translate to the code correctly. Another question you should ask while you're evaluating your web authoring software is, what's your comfort level for making adjustments to assure accessibility? For example, if you need to add headings yourself within a WYSIWYG, can you do that? Or do you have a team member who is a developer and can assist with that? Making sure you've got all your bases covered before starting is essential to avoiding roadblocks later on in the creation process. A quick disclaimer, Accessible Web is not endorsing Shopify. We are simply using it to demonstrate how to evaluate any web authoring software. Okay, so let's get a little familiar with Shopify itself. This is not a comprehensive review of all of the features offered by Shopify, as it's quite numerous, but it hits the highlights for ones that can impact accessibility. Shopify is a web authoring tool that helps customers break into the world of e-commerce. Some of its key features for creating websites include, it does include a WYSIWYG editor with editable code. There is an image on the screen of the WYSIWYG editor that can be found when creating pages. It can define text classifications, like if it's a heading or a paragraph, block quote, whatever you may need. And you'll also see it has a button to activate an AI assistant, which can help you write content, but it also helps define your text type as well as text decoration elements like bold, italic, and underline. The next two buttons are for text color and alignment options, and the last few buttons are for adding different elements, including links, images, videos, tables, and more. The last button, which is an opening bracket with a forward slash and a closing bracket on the end, is for accessing the code. So another feature of Shopify, as briefly touched on before, is it does have an AI assistant to help with the creation process. And it also helps if you need some help with actually using the software itself. Another thing that Shopify has is customizable themes. So the number of themes is quite extensive, having both free options as well as themes available for purchase. Themes are part of the customization trap as that many users find themselves in, as they start with a base template that is accessible, but then they start adding or removing components that then affect accessibility. Themes are a great starting point, but definitely test out each theme before you start adding your customizations to get familiar with it, and then continue to test so that you are making sure that things like focus order or keyboard functionality remains logical and predictable no matter what you put in or take out. Another thing that Shopify offers is the product builder. It has an in-depth form for creating projects for each storefront and involves a lot of filling out form fields to include all of the necessary metadata. This is very helpful to a user who is unfamiliar with search engine optimization or SEO, and to some extent accessibility as well. And that only touches on a very brief overview of Shopify because it also has features like website analytics. You can have a custom domain. You can also add apps to it for a variety of services. It also helps with your marketing and promotions. So it definitely can get a user up and running with little to no skills in web development. All right, moving on to our next slide. We're going to start talking about the customization trap. And we're just going to cover some basics, and some of these are coming from things I've noted in some of my audits or patterns that I've seen just through my years as working with accessibility. So web authoring softwares like Shopify are only as accessible as you can make them. While you can easily fix basics like colors, form fill, and layout elements with simple code tweaks, true accessibility requires intent. Ask yourself these questions as you build. Headings and titles. Are there proper headings established within your pages? Do all of your pages have descriptive page titles? Ensuring your content has the correct framework helps assistive technology navigate easier throughout your site. The next, sorry. The next point is color contrast. When you're constructing your theme, are your colors meeting the right contrast ratio? Are you meeting the 4.5 to 1 contrast ratio for text or the 3 to 1 contrast ratio for pretty much every other component? Personally, I prefer to create a palette and use color contrast checkers like one provided from Accessible Web to test out color combinations before I start building anything, as it can definitely impact your site. Say you've got 3 to 4 colors like orange, lime green, light blue, and gray, and none of them are really meshing together. So you can kind of pivot and either select new colors if it's your own site and you're building from scratch. But if you are restricted with branding, you can kind of use those colors as accents rather than using them for text or backgrounds. And that's just one small recommendation. Moving on to our next concept of images. So is an image decorative or meaningful? Are you adding the appropriate alt text for meaningful images? Shopify does have a lot of features when it comes to images, and adding alt text is easily done. It does allow you to create carousels with proper controls, but tread carefully. Use our accessible web Chrome extension to help run tests to ensure it's communicating its name, role, and value, not just for the carousel, but each slide as well. The next component we want to talk about is labels. So if you're adding a form to a site, are all fields labeled properly? Do they need to be marked as required? Every business has at least 1 to 2 forms, whether it is for reaching out to a seller, or it could be just your ordering form to make sure that you have your shipping, billing, all of that information. So you can also use the Accessible Web Chrome extension to make sure all the labels are correct and that each appropriate required attribute is there for those form fields that are required. We see these types of failures often within a different array of websites. And the last point I kind of wanted to touch on was multiple ways. So when you're building a website, are you going to have a search function, or do you have additional links in the footer area? People tend to overlook multiple ways, as usually designers usually think in one direction, but users may surprise you in how they navigate within a website. For example, I prefer to look through a site before I use a search box. Thinking of multiple Think of multiple ways as a roadmap, and there's usually more than one way to get to a single location, but make sure that if there is a roadblock, a detour is available. All right, moving to our next slide, we're going to do the customization deep dive. So with the basics covered, let's move on to more complex components. So the first one I have on here is the language attribute. If you've got multiple language, make sure each is properly coded with the correct lang attribute. It may seem trivial, but I've seen multiple sites where it isn't defined for whatever reason, but think of it this way. The world is getting smaller as the internet has made global contact easier. Shopify does have the ability to set languages in one of its many settings, as they too realize that language definition is vital, as no one wants to be stopped due to a language barrier or hear assistive technology attempt to speak in one language while the text is in another. So the second point we're going to talk about is apps. So the number of Shopify apps is astounding, but vetting them for accessibility is vital. Consider how an app might impact your site. Could it overwrite your existing work, like keyboard accessibility? Another keynote is that there are accessibility apps out there, but use them with caution. Accessible overlays is like putting a band-aid on a cut that really needs stitches. Or there might be a text zoom app that may end up reordering your site and confuse assistive technology. Always test an app and ensure it won't interfere with other assistive technologies or the function of your site. Next thing we're going to talk about is videos. So videos are great for tutorials or promotion, but they must be captioned. If you're providing instructions, ensure non-visual users can follow by including audio descriptions or media alternatives. Videos are popular and can be utilized as great teaching tools or promotional materials, but it's also the easiest way to exclude people. Text still remains the most universal method of communication as it can be translated into other formats. And the last one I want to touch on is custom code. So whether it's a third-party plugin or something you custom coded, make sure it works properly with your current web authoring software. Sometimes it will work in one code editor, but completely break in another. I have way too many stories from my library days where we wanted a widget to work on our website from one vendor, but the minute I put it in, it wound up breaking the entire page. Or I finally got a widget working in a code editor, and then I put it in the web authoring software and it breaks. So while it seems like this wouldn't be an accessibility issue, but more of a web developer problem, but it does transfer as keyboard functions or other important functions may work in one and not work in the other. So test continuously and often. Moving to our next topic, we're going to cover accessible product pages. Product pages are the bread and butter of an online store, so making sure they are accessible is vital. Here's some features to consider when entering products into your Shopify page. First one, use of color. If you're offering multiple colors, make sure each color has a label to announce to assistive technologies. For example, if you have a row of circles with different color fillings for each of them, that doesn't really mean anything to a person who may be colorblind. Situations arise where having a visible label with color choices can go a long way, such as it could just be a person who's ordering something while they're on a bus or on a train, and the sunlight is really interfering with what they can see on their screen. So the benefit is multifaceted. The next point is sales prices. How is your sales price being read out to assistive technology? Is it clear that one price is the original price and then the other is the sales price? The importance of this cannot be said enough, as struck through text is no longer a tag that can be added, but it also has a universal meaning. Struck through text means it's a no longer valid price or whatever is being crossed out. The trouble is that that is dependent upon site. Take the time and ensure that the correct labels are read out to assistive technology. Our next one is keyboard functions. So can the user access all the features on a product page? For example, if you're adding or subtracting from a quantity, are you using a spin button where you can use arrow keys on a keyboard, or are you using manual entry where you just type in the number of the product you want to buy? I've seen many smaller components overlooked for keyboard function. Keyboards are like text. It's a translator for a variety of assistive technologies, so it's something that can't be ignored or overlooked. Don't overlook it just because it's a small item. That small item can be the difference between a sale and a dropped client. And our last one is metadata. Shopify maximizes the ability to find products both in the site as well as through your search engine optimization or SEO. Make sure you review each field when building product pages and test how it translates with assistive technology. Think of metadata as the difference between a novel and the Cliff Notes version. Yes, you'll get the point from the Cliff Notes versions, but you're missing out of the beauty of the novel. Or for those people who aren't bookworms, say you're looking for a specific instance like the mention of a minor character or an object. Which is easier to search? The Cliff Notes version, which may not even have it in there, or the entire novel. And that's the difference between having the appropriate amount of metadata and the Cliff Notes version of metadata. All right, and moving on to our last topic, which is sustainable monitoring. So you've put in the work of building the website. How do you keep it accessible now? So every website evolves, whether it's a custom coded or built on a web authoring software like Shopify. New products launch, your audience grows, and new apps are added. The key to success is allowing your site to scale without sacrificing accessibility. And here's a couple of points on things to consider and also to work on setting up while you're building your site so that way it's already built in and you can continue your monitoring even after you've launched your site. This includes automated scanning and manual audits. So setting up an automated scanning like our like RAMP, which we offer, can help maintain a good accessibility score. Periodic manual audits, internal or external, completely up to you, is more of an in-depth dive into your site and also can identify issues that aren't caught with automated scanning. A next suggestion would be to provide a user feedback form. This gives users the ability to send in their feedback as well as report accessibility barriers. And getting those reports can prevent you from having a potential lawsuit launched against you. And lastly, user testing. Allowing users to test out your site from various perspectives is invaluable. Theory and planning can only go so far, but getting real-time feedback and experiences from your users may reveal roadblocks, or you may discover something that you never thought of, and users are like, "This is great. How did you do this?" So there's many benefits to doing user testing. And this ties into how can accessible web help? Well, of course, we have RAMP. RAMP does have automated scanning, and Gianna and Ben can hop in whenever they would like. We also offer doing manual audits with our specialists, and also we do consulting and training, and we can provide you with feedbacks. And Gianna? Would you
Yeah,
like to take it
so
from here?
sure. Yeah. So as Hope was saying, we offer kind of a full range of accessibility tools and services. So we're here to be your holistic accessibility partner. As mentioned at the beginning of our webinar today, there is a coupon code in chat. So if you haven't tried Ramp, I'd certainly recommend checking that out. It's a great tool for the ongoing monitoring piece of things and to begin chipping away at accessibility issues and detecting those efficiently. It also contains a guided manual audit tool and a manual audit grid that allows you to take a DIY approach to doing the audits, which, as mentioned, we do offer as a service. So it's a great starting point, and we offer typically 14-day free trials, but that coupon code extends it to 30 days. So feel free to check that out. And with that, we can jump into questions here.